Hi, everyone. Welcome to my talk. Today, we're going to be talking about three main things. The first of which is the importance of respecting mobile, because it is really important, and it's not something the endpoint security space is doing as much right now. The second thing is about education, because education for people in endpoint security around mobile is very limited, as it stands right now. And then the third is convenience, which I think all of you know, because security is basically ruled by convenience and by users choosing convenience over security. So feel free to ask any questions and to raise your hand, just to speak out. I don't want to just get up here and pontificate for a little while. So I'll start with a question. Who in here is in security? Who's a security professional? How about mobile developers? Anyone? And application developers? Okay, cool. We got a good mix. Makes me happy. A little about me. My name is Allie Mellon. This picture was taken 6 years ago at DubDub, Worldwide Developer Conference in San Francisco. I spent a lot of time writing iOS apps, and they were mostly about education, and I also spent some time teaching people how to code for iOS when I was in college. My favorite language is always going to be Objective-C. Sorry, Swifties. But a couple of years later, I did some security research and fell in love with cybersecurity, and then became an engineering consultant before becoming a writer for Cybereason, all about our security research and thought leadership around security. Back when that photo was taken, I did not care about security at all, and I was developing apps that thousands of people were downloading. Developing apps was really accessible. Security was not. It arguably still isn't. And I'm not alone. This is a pervasive issue. Of the 50 of the world's top 100 banks, every single one had at least one security vulnerability. That's right now. This is in the case of financial institutions, which are protecting some of the most valuable assets for hackers to access. So why do you think this is? Does anyone have thoughts on why this happens? Why all of these have security vulnerabilities? Why that's acceptable?
Race to get into the market.
Race to get into the market? Yeah, absolutely. Anything else? I see it breaking down into four things. First, race to get into the market. Deadlines and development shortcuts. So developers, their metrics are all based around getting competitive features out. They don't worry as much about security. If anything, it's just pulling them back. They're forced to move fast, and they choose to put out code instead of putting out secure code. The next is just platform familiarity. Mobile platforms don't have the same broad standardization that desktop ones do. And so you can make apps for a platform with having very little knowledge about it, and then distribute those across platforms even. In contrast, for me, for example, I was exclusively iOS. I did very little Android, not the type of thing that I could possibly get paid for. And so it just like pigeonholes you in order to understand enough about the platform to understand the security behind the platform. The next is consumers, and I don't want to like make a point of blaming consumers, because security needs to be simple for them, and it needs to be accessible for them. Convenience is king. But some just aren't going to install the updates. I have a friend. He has a degree in computer engineering. We did security research together. He refuses to update. He is 2 versions behind every other iPhone. And like he's a technical guy. He has a degree in computer engineering. He works at Google. But he won't do it. And he understands the risks. And then others, they don't even use passcodes to lock their phones. So that's like an automatic in. Yeah?
Why is it that he doesn't want to do it? I mean,
Great question. Yeah, because I've asked him that, because I've been like, what are you thinking? He doesn't want to deal with the bugs. Yeah, he doesn't want to update and not be able to access some apps that he likes. He doesn't want to update and run the risk of like just not being able to use his phone anymore. He likes things how they are, and he doesn't want to change that. Not a great reason, but at the same time, I don't like change all the time. And then the last one is kind of funny. It sounds stupid, but legacy code. It sounds dumb because smartphones are still so new, but the last thing I would want to do is be a Swift developer and come into an environment that's like half Objective-C. You just don't want to deal with it. You don't want to have to worry about bridging. It becomes a mess. And this was something that I was facing even as I stepped out of development and moved into security, which was like 4 years ago. So these are all of the reasons why from a developer perspective, but what we're going to be looking at today is the endpoint side of things, the endpoint security side of things. So for someone in the endpoint security space, what is mobile? What does that mean? What does that break down to? Do you guys have thoughts? Like, what would you pinpoint mobile as? Apple Watch? iPhone? Laptop? Because laptops are where things get a little bit confusing, because it's still considered like a pretty traditional endpoint. So we kind of focus on mobile as iPhones, smartphones, and laptops, and tablets. And they say a lot that these things are secure, but they're not. The marketing can't back it up. They have this ad, but is it true? Not at all. Not at all. Take the latest Google 0 day. 5 exploit chains across iOS 10 to 12. End up with 14 vulnerabilities. And they're able to monitor individuals with root access on the machine. Does that sound like Apple's living up to their marketing promises? Yes. Absolutely. Raise of hands. How many of you have corporate data on your phone right now? Through emails, anything? I do. I was reading a customer email on the ride over here. It's just a reality of convenience. Most people do, and companies are starting to recognize it. 60% of devices containing or accessing enterprise data are mobile. This isn't surprising, and it screams the need for endpoint security to respect mobile and take it seriously. 75% of enterprises have bring your own device policies in place. You're trying to defend something you didn't even issue. It's all about convenience for people. That's the reason these policies exist. And honestly, I don't want to carry around a corporate phone and a personal phone. Inevitably, I'm going to forget one. One's going to run out of battery. I'm going to need to do something, either personal or work, on the other phone, and you're going to end up with cross-contamination anyway. So what does this break down to in an enterprise? Large majority are bring your own devices. And then you have company-owned devices, and then smaller is like custom devices, like point of sale. The bring your own is more than any other. What's the risk? Corporate assets are scattered across these bring your own devices. All of these things can be leveraged by attackers in different ways. Personal data, that can be blackmail. Monitoring is monitoring, like that one's a given. And then corporate assets can be blackmail or used for money, more commonly. But is this a legitimate concern? What do attackers have to work with? 83% of senior professionals think it is an issue. And I think it's an issue. I think most teams agree that it is an issue. So what makes it particularly daunting? Break down the mobile threats into 4 different categories: user behavior, application threats, device threats, and network threats. And I'm going to go into some quick examples of each just to give you an idea of how easy this is. Let's look at behavior. First of all, just because it's user behavior doesn't mean it's the user's fault. And I think that's important to convey because we need to make it easy for them. Convenience is king, again. User behavior breaks down into things like breaking policy, using a corporate device for your personal use, clicking on a malicious link, giving apps extra permissions that they don't need, classic example of this is phishing. Over 2/5 of senior professionals that experience a mobile-related compromise say it involved phishing. Surprise, surprise. Enterprise users are 3 times more likely to fall for a phishing link when on a small screen than when on a laptop. It's kind of crazy, especially because whenever I get a phishing email and I'm on my phone, I just click the contact up at the top and see all of those numbers and letters from for the email address, and I'm like, okay. But I can kind of understand it because the immediacy that mobile devices bring you, you just want to take care of things more quickly. So coming from an enterprise security background, your immediate thought is that this is linked to emails. That you have emails coming in, 66% of emails are first opened on the mobile device, and then the question becomes, is that actually where the issue is? Because I'm making this assumption, coming from an enterprise background, where phishing attacks, vast majority happen over email, that's where they come from. But on mobile devices, it's different. It's not all about email. And this is what I mean about educating. People are coming into the mobile space from the endpoint security space and making assumptions that just don't hold up in an enterprise setting. So only 15% of phishing attacks happen through email for mobile. And the rest come from things like social media, productivity apps, messaging apps, games. Anybody ever get this text? Someone has your photos from WhatsApp and now they are here. That's a little, it makes you panic a little. It's not a great moment. And then the other thing is excess permissions. How many people download an app and it says that they want permissions and they just click OK because they don't want to worry about it? Many apps have access to things they don't need. You can't tell me that 39% need access to the microphone. But developers do this because it's convenient. Ask for the permissions now, and then use them however you need later, instead of updating one time and then it asks them to give permissions. It's a bad user experience. It's better to just have all the access you want now. But it goes even deeper than that. 90% of Android apps request full network access. Tell me what they need that for. They don't. But they do. And even 12% of Android apps request access to modify system settings. It's just convenience. Developers want it because they can have it. And users, a lot of times, they're just like, whatever. I can trust it. It's just my phone. What's important on here anyway? Even though it's a device that's with them 24/7. Next up is application threats. Application threats are things like malicious apps, enterprise apps with poor coding practices. OWASP actually has a great top 10 ways cybercriminals compromise mobile apps that you can look at. 70% of organizations have a custom app, and over half of them, are worried about insecure coding. Anybody here part of an organization that has a custom app? How confident do you feel about it from a security perspective? I won't tell anyone. Oh, and what's your company's name? 80% of malicious apps have access to internal networks and are scanning nearby ports. So you're finding that these malicious apps, they don't just want to get on the device. They want to go somewhere else. They want to get access to something else, which makes total sense. But the important thing to think about is, how likely is this to actually happen? Is this really going to happen? Turns out, for enterprises with 100 to 250 devices, there's a 5% likelihood that this will happen. Not bad. You can take that risk. But as you get higher up, so do the numbers. With 1,000 to 2,500 device company, it's a 40% likelihood. Huge jump. Then you get up into the 5,000s to 9,000s, 85% likelihood that at least one device has a malicious app. Then once you get over 10,000, it's 97%. Large enterprises, it's just a reality that they have to face. This is a problem. Now we're going to look at some device stuff. This is stuff like devices going missing and, again, updating the operating system, which a lot of people just don't do. 57% of Android devices were running an operating system at least 2 versions behind. That's terrible. This equates to 507 known vulnerabilities per device. 507! It's crazy, with nearly 2/3 of those rated critical or high risk. Anybody here not keep their phone up to date? That wants to admit it? I update mine. Sometimes I regret it because things stop working. I just upgraded to Catalina because I liked the name better than the last one. And that was a huge mistake. Half of my things don't work. That's a laptop, but still, same thing. Yeah. And now a look at the network. This is our good friend connecting to public Wi-Fi. You end up exposing credentials to all the devices you connect to, not just yourself when you do this. 80%, over 80% of employees use public Wi-Fi for work tasks, even when they're explicitly told not to, even when it's banned. It's even easier when you think about mobile. Like, you just open up your phone, you see all these Wi-Fi networks. I'll just choose one. It doesn't really matter. 70% of Wi-Fi sessions were over an unencrypted connection. We can't force people to respect mobile. We can't just tell them, don't do that, and they won't do that. Which one is legitimate here? It's definitely the bottom one, right? But at the same time, McDonald's free Wi-Fi at the top, I don't know if I'd question that if I was near a McDonald's. Or like, which Starbucks Wi-Fi do you choose? Y-Fi or Wi-Fi? JetBlue, they're not JetBlue Fly-Fi, they're just Fly-Fi. And it's not like they keep it, except for Starbucks. Starbucks actually does a pretty good job keeping it front and center for people who come in, but like Fly-Fi, you get on the plane and you just try to connect to the one that seems the most like JetBlue. So that's just a brief overview of mobile threats. There are obviously a lot more, but these are some that are just like really accessible and to the point where it's like, it's insane. Like with the, take the Google 0 Day. Like that would not have, mobile device management wouldn't have prevented that. And that was 2 years. It was operating for 2 years. So do you bring your own device to work? Why? Convenience? Oops. Is mobile lucrative? What makes mobile a good target? So the first is local data. Stealing corporate data or any sensitive data we've talked about is very helpful. And then you get to the other side of things, which is the entry point. It's basically every mobile device that these people have is basically the server that's somewhere that no one knows about that leaves an entry point into the system and gets hacked. And this leads us back to the 57% of Android users that are 2 versions behind. So let's start with sensitive data. What sensitive data is on your device? Your usernames, your passwords, your credit card info, your corporate data, pictures of your cat. If they own your phone, they own you. Something that we really like is 2-factor authentication. But say they get credentials for your corporate email and they log in from their device. You've got 2-factor authentication, no problem, you'll get a text message. But if they own your iPhone or any mobile device you have, then they're the ones getting that text message. They can delete it. They can use it to sign into your account. It's just a step that makes their attack that much easier. And let's talk about the entry point, which is a more high-level scenario for an endpoint protection platform. When you are a security analyst, you get an alert. Something's made a pass prevention, you need to check it out. You find the target, you start investigating, looks like they were trying to exfiltrate data. You find the malware has done some lateral movement on the network, they're communicating with a C2, but you can't find the root cause. There's a black hole of blind spots. They're basically invisible to security teams that don't have mobile threat detection. Turns out it's Joe's iPhone. Damn it, Joe. Joe hasn't updated his phone in 2 years. He opened a text earlier that sent him to a malicious web page and gained root access on his phone. As an endpoint security vendor, you don't know what Joe's phone is doing. You don't. You don't have the way to talk to people about what Joe is doing. You don't have a way to detect before it makes it further on your network. It's a problem. It's the black hole of blind spots. It's a huge blind spot for enterprises that don't have mobile threat detection. You can't respond to what you can't detect. Anyone have any examples of other avenues of attack that combining mobile with enterprises and with corporate information would look like? I'll give a more high-level example. Your everyday phishing email. You get an email, you're in the finance department, and you get this email from the CEO. They need funds transferred now. Most people, I think, are getting better with this, and they would take a moment to say, I gotta go talk to the CEO and see if this is legit before they just send the money. But some people still do it. But what about when 2 minutes later, you get a text message that says it's from the CEO, asking you where are those funds transferred? Why aren't they transferred yet? It's a completely different medium that just confirms and legitimizes what that email was trying to say. And all they need to do is gain access to your mobile device and then set up a fake John Smith CEO. And then if you still aren't sure, they can do a follow-up call. Take it a step further, be really pushy, start yelling at you on the phone using deep voice software. There's no way you're not sending them money after that. So we understand the problem. Now how can we address it in endpoint security? First is education. Continue to educate within application security, educate end users, educate developers. Be nice to people when you educate them. This is similar to what Tanya was saying in her keynote. Everyone needs to be an advocate for mobile security. Everyone needs to teach people to respect mobile. Enterprises need to take mobile seriously. A lot of people say, oh yes, we take mobile very seriously. But when you get down to the actual implementation, they're not doing anything. Or what they're doing is not nearly enough. By this year, mobile malware is supposed to account for 1/3 of total malware. We need to address it now. Don't reinvent the pyramid. Just because mobile seems foreign, endpoint security people need to not treat it as something completely different, but see how they can adapt their system to address it. It doesn't need to be a completely new, completely different thing that they don't consider. They still need to educate themselves on it, but it's not a completely foreign entity. And then leverage the familiar. In the endpoint security space, MITRE ATT&CK is a big thing. They actually already have a MITRE ATT&CK for mobile. Working with IT for MDMs, for example, that's a great example of how working with IT is really important to build a more comprehensive mobile defense. And then always remember that convenience is king. We have to make it easy on the developers, the end users, and the security people. Productive communication is critical. So developers need to make it easy for security people. Security people need to make it easy for developers. Developers and security people need to make it easy for end users. And other security people, the ones in endpoint security, need to make it easy for everyone. Unless you want another console to monitor. So the importance is to take an endpoint agnostic approach. We want to see the entire scope of the attack from start to finish, including any mobile aspects. We don't want analysts to have to worry about something separate when they're trying to identify mobile. It needs to be in the same platform, the entire scope. You need to integrate with MDMs. You need to address these issues with an actual endpoint protection platform, because mobile is an endpoint. What happens in 2025? What's next? What can we use mobile as a blueprint for in the future? The obvious one is IoT, but What do you guys think is next? What do you think is going to be most important 2025, 2050 to protect? How is this changing? Thank you. That was my talk.